The summer air in Cedar Hill carried the scent of sagebrush and warm earth, and the Miller house sat at the edge of town where the asphalt surrendered to gravel roads and the sky stretched wide without apology. Jessica Miller stood barefoot on the porch, her hand resting over the gentle curve of her belly. The wind tugged at her auburn hair, and for a moment, she closed her eyes, trying to memorize the sound of cicadas humming from the trees. It was a quiet kind of evening, the kind you want to bottle up and keep forever. Inside, Jonathan Miller was humming to himself as he fiddled with the latch on a wooden crib, freshly sanded and painted a soft cream. He wasn't the best with tools, more of a guitar and story kind of man, but he'd promised Jessica he'd build their son's first bed. He wanted their boy to come into a world filled with things made by hand, things that mattered. "You're humming off-key again," Jessica teased, stepping into the doorway. Jonathan looked up with a crooked grin. "I'm charmingly off-key. It's a character trait." She walked over, placed her hand on his shoulder. "Looks good." "You think so?" He ran his fingers along the side of the crib. "It's not perfect, but I want him to sleep safe. Even if I'm not." "Don't," she said quietly, her voice catching. He nodded. There were things better left unspoken. The war had been on the news for months now. Deserts on fire, men in uniform walking through dust storms. He had tried to defer deployment, but the call came anyway. Orders were orders. He would leave in 3 weeks. They didn't talk about it unless they had to. Instead, they spent their time naming stars on the porch, dreaming up names for their son, settling finally on Justin, after Jonathan's late uncle, and writing lists of lullabies they'd sing together. Jonathan recorded his voice on an old cassette player, leaving bedtime stories and messages for the baby. "You're gonna grow up strong, kiddo," one of the tapes began. "You've got your mama's heart and hopefully my ears, because hers are tiny and adorable, but completely useless for holding sunglasses." Jessica laughed and cried in equal measure the night she first played it. The day Jonathan left was colder than it should have been. Early September always danced on the edge of summer, but this morning the sky was overcast and still. Jessica drove him to the base. Her hand clung to his the entire way, as if touch alone could anchor him to this world. At the gate, Jonathan turned to her. "I'm gonna come back. You know that, right?" "I know," she said. She didn't. He kissed her, then knelt down, whispering to the bump beneath her sweater. "See you soon, little guy." And then he was gone. War doesn't begin with explosions. It begins with silence. A silence that falls heavy after a loved one leaves. Jessica filled her days with prenatal checkups, with reading parenting books, with the hum of the washing machine. She wrote letters every week, sealed with kisses and scented with lavender. Jonathan wrote back when he could. His letters were filled with stories of sandstorms that stung like wasps, of local children kicking soccer balls through alleyways, of laughter shared between brothers in arms. He never wrote about fear, but Jessica read between the lines. Then came the night she called him. It had been a hard day, her ankle swollen, back aching, the baby kicking like he was training for a boxing match. She hadn't heard from Jonathan in 10 days, and the silence gnawed at her. When he finally answered, she burst into tears. Hey. Jonathan's voice came through the static. "What's wrong?" She breathed. "I needed to hear you. That's all." Jonathan grew quiet, then said softly, "Tell me about him." "He's strong," she said, smiling through her tears. "He kicks every time I lie down. Like he's saying, hey, no rest for the pregnant." Jonathan laughed. "I can't wait to meet him," he said. "I want to be the one to teach him how to ride a bike, how to throw a ball, how to sing out of tune like a pro." "You will," she whispered. "Just come home. Don't worry about us." Just come home." That was the last time they spoke. 12 hours later, the phone rang. It was the kind of ring that splits time into before and after. A bombing in Baghdad. A surprise attack. Jonathan was on patrol. He didn't suffer, they said. He died instantly. He was 25 years old. Jessica couldn't cry at first. She just sat on the kitchen floor, her hands on her stomach, her breath gone. The world moved in slow motion. Neighbors came. Her sister flew in from Denver. Food piled up in the fridge. But none of it reached her. Jonathan's belongings were returned in a brown box. His uniform, a dog tag, a worn copy of the Velveteen Rabbit, and a folded flag. She gave birth 3 weeks later. Justin came into the world with a cry that echoed like a vow. Jessica held him close and whispered, "You'll know your daddy. I promise." But promises made in grief are fragile things. Years passed. The baby became a toddler, the toddler a boy. Jessica worked 2 jobs, one at a small grocery store and another cleaning houses on weekends. Bills piled up. Debt collectors started calling. She did everything she could. Sold off furniture, jewelry, even the wedding ring she once swore never to remove. And when it still wasn't enough, she looked at the car in the driveway. A black 1999 Toyota Camry. Jonathan's car. It still smelled faintly of his cologne and the mint gum he chewed endlessly. Jessica would sometimes sit in the driver's seat at night just to cry. But one night, after receiving another urgent letter from the bank, she made the call. A man from the next town over came to buy it. Cash in hand. Jessica handed him the keys with trembling fingers. "I hope it takes good care of you," she said, choking on the words. The man gave her a puzzled look, nodded, and drove away. She stood there for a long time, watching the car disappear around the corner. She never told Justin. Not then. Justin Miller never knew the sound of his father's laugh, the warmth of his hug, or the scratchy edge of his 5 o'clock shadow after a long day's work. To him, Dad was a shape in a photograph, a folded flag on a shelf, a name embroidered on a worn military jacket he wasn't allowed to wear until he was older. Jessica had tried. God, how she had tried. She kept the house neat, made pancakes in the shape of animals, and never let a birthday pass without a cake and candles, even if some years there were only 3 or 4 gifts wrapped in newspaper instead of shiny paper. She did everything she could to make up for the space Jonathan had left behind. But some voids are too wide to cross with effort alone. From the time he was 5, Justin would point at the other kids' dads at school and ask, "Is that what mine looked like?" Jessica would smile and nod. "Kind of," she'd say. "But yours had better posture." He stopped asking by age 7. By then, he knew his house wasn't like the others. He noticed how other dads showed up to soccer games, carried their kids on their shoulders at the fair, grilled burgers in the backyard on Saturdays. Justin always chewed slower when the other boys talked about dad jokes and dad rage and dad rules. His mom never talked much about the war, not because she wanted to hide it, but because the words hurt too much. She focused instead on making their small house a place where Justin felt safe. There were drawings taped to the fridge, glow-in-the-dark stars on a ceiling, and stacks of bedtime storybooks. But no matter how many lullabies she sang, nothing could replace the quiet questions in his heart. Why didn't he come back? Did he love me? Would he have liked me? He was 9 when he first asked, "Was I the reason he went to war?" Jessica dropped the dish she was washing. It shattered in the sink. She turned, soaking wet, and knelt beside him, tears already streaking down her cheeks. "No, baby. No, no, no. Your father loved you before you were even born. He went because he had to. He was brave. He was scared too, but he wanted to protect us. That's who he was. Then why do I feel like I lost something I never even had? Jessica had no answer for that. Their financial life was a tightrope. The car had helped for a little while. She used the money to pay off the most aggressive creditors and fix the leaking roof. But there were always more bills, medical, utilities, groceries. And as Justin grew older, so did his questions. When he turned 12, he asked to see the box. Jessica brought it out from the closet. The box of Jonathan's things. She laid them out gently. Uniform, dog tags, an old watch, the book of fairy tales, a notebook filled with sketches Jonathan had drawn during downtime in Iraq. Most of them were crude pencil drawings of desert landscapes and stick-figure soldiers, but one page stood out. It was a sketch of a crib. Above it, in Jonathan's shaky block letters, were the words, "Can't wait to build this with you, buddy." Justin stared at it for a long time. Then, carefully, he folded the page and tucked it into his backpack. "Can I keep this one?" "Of course," Jessica whispered. Teenage years crept in like dusk, slow and shadowy. Justin grew taller, quieter. He stopped bringing friends over. Stopped asking for bedtime stories. He listened to old cassette tapes, alone in his room. Tapes Jonathan had made before leaving. One day, at age 14, he came home and asked, "What happened to Dad's car?" Jessica froze mid-chop over the cutting board. "The Toyota?" she asked, stalling. "Yeah, the black one in the picture." She swallowed. "I had to sell it. Years ago. We needed the money." Justin nodded slowly, but something inside him twisted. It felt like losing his father all over again. "I wish you hadn't," he said, softly. "I just wanted to sit in it. That's all. Just once." Jessica's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she said. He didn't respond. He just walked to his room and closed the door. She stood at the counter for a long time, knife still in hand, the onion forgotten. That night, she rummaged through an old photo album and found the last picture they had of the car. Jonathan in uniform, leaning against it in the driveway, grinning like a kid with a secret. She tucked the photo into Justin's school folder the next morning, without a note. He didn't mention it, but he kept it. It went everywhere with him. By the time Justin turned 15, he was working part-time at the local library. Jessica, now juggling 2 cleaning jobs and bookkeeping for a friend's small hardware shop, tried to make time to talk to him, but he often kept to himself. One day, on the bus ride home, he sat staring out the window, holding the photo of the car in his hands. The memory of it wasn't even his, it was inherited, imagined, borrowed. But it mattered. That car was the last thing his father had touched, the last space that still held his warmth. Not the uniform, not the flag. The car. He didn't know how to find it, didn't even know the license plate. But something in him whispered, try. He started asking around, online mostly, searching forums, digging into DMV public records, even messaging a couple of used car dealers. All dead ends. Until he told his mother. It was a cold night in October. The kind of night where the air smelled like burning leaves and frost threatened the ground. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, silent for a long time. "I want to find Dad's car," he said at last. Jessica stared at him. He wasn't asking for permission. He was telling her. "I just want to sit in it once," he said. To feel him. "I don't know. I know it sounds dumb." "It's not dumb," she said, her voice shaking. "I should have never sold it." "You had to," he replied, surprising them both. Jessica reached across the table and took his hand. "I'll help you," she said. And for the first time in years, they cried together. What they didn't know was that a journey had already begun, one that would stretch across towns, years, and the hearts of strangers. A journey back to the seat he left behind. The 1999 Toyota Camry was not a beautiful car by anyone's standards. It was boxy, scratched, and its paint had faded from a proud jet black to a dull charcoal. But it ran, smooth, dependable, like a loyal old friend who never broke a promise. After Jessica sold the car 15 years ago, the man who drove it away was a mechanic named Alan Tate. He didn't ask about its history. He only cared that the engine purred and the tires had life in them. To him, it was just another trade, a bargain to fix up and flip for a modest profit. He cleaned it up, patched the dent in the rear door, and changed the oil. But even Alan noticed something peculiar. The glove compartment held a cassette tape labeled "For My Boy," but no tape deck remained in the car. He assumed it was junk, threw it in his garage drawer, and sold the car 2 weeks later. The next owner was a nurse named Maribel. Recently divorced, she was moving across the state with her teenage daughter, Lila. The Camry became their freedom on wheels. Maribel nicknamed it Blackbird, and over the next 3 years, it carried them through snowstorms, late-night hospital shifts, and camping trips. Maribel was the kind of woman who talked to her car like it was a companion. "Hang in there, Bird," she'd say, patting the dashboard when the engine groaned uphill. "You've got 1 more mile in you, I know it." Lila rolled her eyes at first, but even she grew fond of the stubborn old car that never quit, even when they barely had enough for gas. Eventually, when Maribel remarried, she passed the Camry on to a friend's son, Brandon, a 19-year-old college student who needed cheap transportation and had no idea how to change a tire. Brandon treated the car like a tank. He spilled soda on the upholstery, left fast food wrappers in the back seat, and bumped the bumper more than once while trying to parallel park. But somehow, the Toyota endured. What Brandon didn't know was that under the passenger seat, still taped in place, was a folded-up letter. Jessica had tucked it there years ago, one final message to Jonathan she couldn't bear to keep. It read simply, "You didn't come home, but he did, and he's beautiful." No one ever found it. Not Maribel, not Brandon, but the car remembered. Years passed. Owners changed. The Camry went from city to city, state to state. At one point, it sat abandoned in a tow yard for 6 months, its battery dead, tires flat, waiting to be junked. But a man named Rick Sanders came along, a quiet, solitary widower who restored old cars as a way to stay busy after his wife passed. He didn't know why he chose the Camry that day. It wasn't special, but something about the way it sat, proud even in decay, reminded him of someone he used to be. So he towed it home. Rick lived alone on the edge of a sleepy Utah town, near the foot of a mountain range. He spent his mornings drinking black coffee and reading war memoirs, and his afternoons in the garage with classic rock playing from dusty speakers. Restoring the Camry became a quiet mission. He fixed the engine, replaced the upholstery, and reinstalled a tape deck just for fun. When he found the old cassette labeled "For My Boy" inside a small compartment under the spare tire, a compartment he'd almost missed, he was curious enough to play it. Jonathan's voice crackled to life. "Hey, buddy. It's your dad. I guess if you're hearing this, I'm not around anymore." Rick sat very still. "I don't know what you look like yet. I don't know if you'll have my eyes or your mom's laugh. But I know this, you're loved. So much. And even if I can't be there to teach you how to drive, I hope this car gets to." The voice paused. "I built your crib, you know. It was crooked. Your mom laughed at me, but I was proud of it. I hope you build something crooked one day too. Something only you can make." Rick pressed stop. He didn't play the rest. Not yet. But he didn't throw it away either. A year later, on an ordinary afternoon, Rick sat at his kitchen table scrolling through Facebook. He didn't usually bother with social media. Too much noise. But a local veterans group had posted something that caught his eye. A story about a boy named Justin Miller. Rick clicked. The post was written by a woman named Jessica. She spoke of her late husband, a soldier, of a boy who never knew his father, of a car, a black 1999 Toyota Camry, that had once been the only thing connecting them. Rick dropped his phone. He walked to the garage, looked at the car, sat in the driver's seat. The same seat a young soldier had once occupied. The same seat his son longed to find. Rick closed his eyes. He'd never believed in fate, but this felt like something bigger than coincidence. The car didn't belong to him anymore. That night, Rick wrote an email to the organization mentioned in the post. Follow the flag. He offered to return the car, no payment needed. Just a quiet handoff.
No fuss.
But Kyle Fox, the founder of the nonprofit, had a different idea. We're gonna make this right, Kyle said over the phone. And we're gonna make it beautiful. Rick smiled. Just make sure the boy gets to sit in the seat. He will, Kyle promised. And the plan began to take shape. The winter of Justin's 15th year settled over Cedar Hill like a heavy wool blanket. Snow came early, coating the roofs in quiet white and silencing the usual traffic on Main Street. The Miller home, small and aging, stood at the end of a narrow cul-de-sac, its porch light flickering like a heartbeat in the dark. Inside, Justin sat at the dining table, eyes fixed on a worn manila envelope. The photograph of the car, folded at the corners, rested beside a handwritten note. Maybe it's still out there. We can try. He had stared at that photo for years. But now the longing had matured. It wasn't just about the car. It was about the man who had once driven it. The man everyone told him was brave,
Strong. Kind.
but those were just words to Justin. What he needed was proof. Something he could touch.
Smell.
Hear. He didn't want medals. He wanted moments. A conversation. A memory. Something he never got. And so he began the search in earnest. Jessica watched him with quiet admiration. He wasn't the little boy who cried at night anymore. He was taller than her now, and his voice had deepened with the weight of unspoken thoughts. But he still hugged her every morning before school, still thanked her for every packed lunch, still looked back once at the door before stepping into the world. Together, they posted the story. A simple message, shared through a local Facebook group. We're looking for a black 1999 Toyota Camry. It belonged to a soldier named Jonathan Miller, who died in Iraq before meeting his son. That son is now 15. And he just wants to sit in his father's seat. They included the last known photo, the one with Jonathan leaning against the car, arms crossed, wearing his uniform and a crooked smile. They didn't expect much. But something strange happened. People responded, not with the usual indifference or pity, but with action.
Shares.
Comments. Messages.
Hundreds of them.
Then thousands. Veterans who had served in Iraq wrote in with memories of Jonathan, short, blurry memories, but real. A guy who sang Sweet Home Alabama during patrol, who always carried extra socks to give to new recruits, who once gave his last energy bar to a stray dog in Fallujah. For the first time in his life, Justin was meeting his father, not in stories told by his mother, but in the voices of men who had laughed with him in a war zone. He wrote each one back. Personally, he thanked them. And then he waited. 3 weeks passed. Then one evening, Jessica's phone buzzed. It was an email from a man named Kyle Fox. He introduced himself as the founder of Follow the Flag, a nonprofit dedicated to honoring veterans and their families. He had read their story, and he knew where the car was. Jessica gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. She called Justin into the room. As he read the email, his hands began to shake. "Mom," he said quietly, "it's real." She nodded, eyes shining. "It's real." Kyle offered to bring the car himself, but he also asked if they would allow his team to do something more. He wanted to restore it, not just mechanically, but as a tribute. He wanted to make it beautiful again. Justin said yes, but only if they didn't erase the scratches on the glove compartment. Dad probably put those there, he explained. I want to leave some of him in it. Kyle understood. The next month passed like a dream stitched together by community and kindness. Kyle's team towed the car into a veteran-run auto shop. They buffed out the rust, replaced the cracked windshield, rewired the radio, and sewed new leather into the seats. But they left the scratches on the glove box. They left the dent on the inside of the trunk. And they reinstalled the old tape deck, just as Jonathan had once used. When the car was nearly ready, Kyle called Rick Sanders, the man who had given it up. I think he's going to cry, Rick said softly. Maybe we all will, Kyle replied. Back in Cedar Hill, Justin didn't sleep the night before his 16th birthday. The snow had melted, and the town was blinking toward spring. The sky outside his window was deep navy blue, freckled with stars. He sat on his bed, holding his father's notebook, the one filled with sketches from Iraq. His fingers traced the edges of the page with a crib drawing. It had yellowed, but the pencil lines still held strong. I'm going to make you proud, he whispered. He wasn't sure who he was talking to anymore, his father or himself. On the morning of his birthday, Jessica made blueberry pancakes. 16, she said, ruffling his hair. How did that happen? You blinked, he said with a grin. She didn't argue. He didn't go to school that day. Around noon, a knock came at the door. Justin opened it. A man stood there, tall, bearded, with kind eyes and a gray flannel shirt. Behind him, parked in the driveway, was a freshly polished black Toyota Camry. Justin froze. I'm Kyle, the man said, offering his hand. This is for you. Justin couldn't move. Then, slowly, he stepped past the doorway, his sneakers crunching on gravel. He walked toward the car, each step more unreal than the last. He ran his hand along the hood. The car was warm from the drive. Solid. Present. Not a dream. He opened the driver's door. Inside, the seat was exactly as he had imagined, worn, a little sun-bleached and perfect. He sat down and wept. Jessica stood at the edge of the driveway, holding her hands to her chest. Kyle stayed a few steps back, giving them space. Justin gripped the steering wheel with both hands. That, whispered. And the wind carried it upward, toward the sky. The moment Justin sat in the driver's seat, the entire world outside that car seemed to fall away. The leather was warm, shaped by years of someone else's weight, his father's weight. His fingers curled around the steering wheel slowly, reverently. He ran his hand across the dashboard, pausing where the sun had worn a small patch near the defrost vent. He closed his eyes. He could almost feel him there. Not a ghost, not a memory, but a presence, subtle, steady, like the hum of a quiet engine waiting for the next turn. Jessica stayed at a distance, tears rolling silently down her face. Kyle Fox watched too, his own hands tucked in his pockets, jaw tight. I didn't think I'd cry, Kyle muttered. But damn. Later that evening, Justin wrote a letter. Not a text. Not a tweet. A real, handwritten letter, folded and placed carefully into the glove compartment. For his dad. Just a few lines, but they carried the weight of 16 silent years. Dear Dad, I made it. I found it. I found you. I think this seat remembers you. I hope you'd be proud of me. Love. Justin. Kyle took a picture, just one. It was of Justin sitting behind the wheel, head bowed slightly, the afternoon sun painting golden streaks across the windshield. He asked permission to post it on Follow the Flag's page, along with a short caption. This young man never met his father. His father gave everything for his country. Today, with a little help from strangers and a lot of love from his mother, he finally sat in his dad's seat. They posted it at 6:03 p.m. By 6:20, it had 1,400 likes. By 7 o'clock, it was being shared across veterans groups, parenting forums, and news outlets. By midnight, it had reached over 100,000 people. The next morning, Jessica's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from strangers, emails from media outlets, interview requests, offers to help financially, emotionally, even from people who had once served with Jonathan. There were people offering scholarships for Justin, donations to the nonprofit, and handwritten letters from other children of fallen soldiers. One woman wrote, "I lost my father in Afghanistan when I was 4. I never understood what I was missing until I saw your photo. Thank you for giving me words for my grief." Another message, from a man in Nebraska, simply said, "I served with Jonathan. He once saved my life. I never got to thank him. Tell his son he's doing just fine by his father." Justin read each one. Every word felt like a new piece of his father being handed back to him. Not the war stories, the real ones. How he once carried an injured comrade on his back for 2 miles. How he always made terrible coffee but insisted on brewing it anyway. How he mailed back paper cranes folded from Iraqi newspapers just to make Jessica smile. That weekend, Kyle invited Justin to speak briefly at a Follow the Flag event in the neighboring town. He hesitated at first. He'd never spoken in front of a crowd, and definitely not about something this personal. But Jessica looked him in the eye and said, "You've spent your life trying to know your father. This is your chance to introduce him to the world." And so he did. Dressed in his father's old field jacket, slightly oversized, but fitting in all the ways that mattered, Justin stood before a small gathering of veterans, families, and neighbors. He told them the story, not just of the car, but of what it meant to grow up with silence, of longing, of the ache of not knowing someone you love. "I never got to meet my dad," he said, voice steady but soft. "But I've met his kindness, his humor, his brothers in arms. And now, thanks to a car that shouldn't even be running, I've finally met a piece of him, too." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The next week, the national press picked up the story. NBC, CNN, even the Washington Post ran headlines like, "A son finds his father through a car and a nation watches. The boy who sat in his father's seat." 16 years later, a drive to remember. Jessica kept every article. People who had never met the Millers sent them care packages, notes, even miniature replicas of the black Camry as keepsakes. A retired Air Force engineer built Justin a scale model of the exact 1999 Camry with a tiny photo of Jonathan printed inside. But through all the noise, Justin stayed grounded. He still went to school, still stocked books at the library, still came home, kicked off his shoes, and helped Jessica with dishes. Only now he had a new ritual. Every Sunday afternoon he sat in the car. No keys. No destination. Just the silence of the driver's seat, a cassette in the deck, and his father's voice in his ear. "You're gonna grow up strong, kiddo. You've got your mama's heart." Those drives became sacred. Not for where they went, but for what they brought back. And perhaps the most beautiful thing of all was that this story didn't just reconnect a boy with his father. It connected strangers to one another. It reminded people across the country, across the world, of what it means to belong to something bigger. A family, a memory, a nation, or maybe just a father and son, separated by time, but reunited by a single black car and the love that never left its seat. In every scratch of paint, every worn patch of fabric, the black 1999 Toyota Camry carried a memory. Not just of Jonathan Miller, but of all the lives it had quietly passed through, like a ghost that chose to linger, not to haunt, but to hold. Rick Sanders had never believed in second chances. After his wife passed, he lived each day by routine. Black coffee, crossword puzzles, oil stains on the garage floor. Life had become a slow rhythm of remembering and forgetting. But the Camry changed that. When he found the cassette tape, Jonathan's voice emerging from dusty speakers, it was like unlocking a door to something he'd lost in himself. "I guess if you're hearing this, I'm not around anymore," the voice had said. Rick had stopped breathing. He'd heard grief before, seen it in fellow veterans' eyes, but never like this. Never with this strange, sacred softness. He hadn't listened to the rest at first. He wasn't ready. But after the car left, after it was given to Justin, he finally played the full tape one night. Alone in his garage. The lights dim, the winter wind rattling the roof. "I hope you laugh a lot. I hope you mess up and try again. I hope you never forget to say sorry or thank you. And I hope, one day, this car reminds you that you were never alone." Rick wept into his hands. Not just for Jonathan, but for himself. For all the years he had let his grief define his silence. The next day, he signed up to volunteer at Follow the Flag. He didn't need a second chance at life, but he could help someone else find theirs. Maribel, the nurse who once called the Camry Blackbird, had almost forgotten about the car. Years had passed, her daughter grown and married. But one day, scrolling through a veteran's blog, she saw the photo of Justin in the driver's seat. Her breath caught. There it was. The same crack in the rear-view mirror. The same sun-faded corner of the dashboard. She clicked the article. Read the story. Read about Jonathan, Jessica, Justin. And she remembered. Not just the car, but the nights she had driven home in her scrubs, exhausted to her bones, whispering, "Hang in there, bird," while her daughter slept in the back seat. That car had carried her through the hardest chapter of her life. She messaged Jessica privately. "I just wanted you to know," she wrote, "your husband's car once carried two scared women to safety again and again. It never once broke down. Not once. He built it strong. Just like you." Jessica cried reading that message. Not because it was sad, but because it was true. Even Alan Tate, the mechanic who had briefly owned the car and tossed aside the old cassette, found himself holding a newspaper one morning with Justin's story on the front page. At first, he didn't recognize the car. But then he saw the badge. The same custom pin he'd never bothered to remove. A bronze eagle, right above the glove box. "I thought that kid looked familiar," he muttered to himself. He dug through the drawers in his garage. The ones filled with old spark plugs and mismatched screws. At the back, under a coil of unused wires, he found the cassette. "For my boy." He hadn't listened to it. Not then. He hadn't been the type to get sentimental. But that day, he drove across town to Follow the Flag's Utah office. He handed the cassette to the receptionist without explanation. "I think this belongs to a young man named Justin." He didn't leave a name, but they knew who he was. And so the car's history began to take shape, not as a timeline, but as a constellation. A web of lives connected by black upholstery, soft engine purrs, and a father's whispered promises caught in magnetic tape. Kyle Fox documented everything. He created a digital map called the Camry Journey. Pins marked each location the car had traveled to. Stories attached to each pin. A mechanic in Colorado. A nurse in Idaho. A student in Reno. Each one added a note, a photo, a memory. And each story was gently folded back into the bigger one. The story of Justin and Jonathan. People who had never met Jonathan began to refer to him by name. I read what Jonathan said on the tape. "Jonathan's car reminds me of my dad's. I wish my father had left something like that. In a world oversaturated with noise and speed, something about this old car and the quiet love it carried moved people. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it was human. Justin saw the map one night on his laptop. He clicked every pin, read every message. It felt like looking at the stars. "This is his trail," he whispered. "He left more than just a seat behind." And suddenly, it wasn't about loss anymore. It was about legacy. About how love can outlast life if it's folded into the right places, like glove compartments, or cassette tapes, or the way a son learns to drive. Spring came early that year. The snow melted fast in Cedar Hill, revealing earth damp with memory and front yards eager to bloom. The town thawed with it. Children rode their bikes again, dogs barked at squirrels, and neighbors returned to porch swings with warm mugs in hand. At the Miller house, the black Camry sat under the carport like a veteran returned from a long tour, honored and home at last. Justin washed it every Sunday, carefully, like it might crack under too much pressure. He never played music in the car, only his father's cassette tapes. He knew them by heart now. "Hey buddy, if you're hearing this, then I guess I didn't make it back. But that doesn't mean I'm gone." Jonathan's voice lived between the seams of that vehicle, in the creak of the steering column, in the faint smell of worn leather and desert dust. And Justin, he wasn't just driving anymore. He was listening, learning. Jessica noticed it first. He walked taller now, spoke with more certainty. He wasn't a boy trying to become a man. He was one. And though she couldn't explain how or when, she knew something had shifted. It wasn't just the car. It was what came with it. On the day of his driving test, Justin arrived 30 minutes early. The instructor, Mr. Healy, raised a brow when he saw the Camry. "Bit of a classic," he said. Justin smiled.
"Yeah,
"You could say that." The test was uneventful. Parallel parking, lane changes, proper use of signals. But as they pulled back into the DMV lot, Mr. Healy glanced over with a curious expression. "Your hands," he said. "They don't just steer. They feel the wheel, like you're listening to the car." "I am," Justin said simply. That night, after receiving his license, Kyle invited him to dinner with a small group from Follow the Flag. Just a few veterans, a couple of teen volunteers, and one very special guest, Rick Sanders. Justin hadn't seen Rick since the day the car arrived. When Rick entered the restaurant, Justin stood instinctively. "Sir," he said, voice steady. Rick chuckled. "None of that, sir, business. Call me Rick." They shook hands. Firmly, respectfully. "I just wanted to say thank you," Justin began. "I know you didn't have to give the car back, but you did, and I'll never forget it." Rick met his eyes. "I think your dad would have done the same. And besides, I didn't give it back. I just gave it forward." After dinner, the group walked out together. The Camry was parked under a street lamp, glowing faintly like a sentinel. Kyle reached into his coat and pulled out a small, black velvet box. "This," he said, "is from all of us." Justin opened it. Inside lay a keychain.
Custom made.
A single word engraved in silver, "Legacy." And on the back, the coordinates of the place where Jonathan had recorded his first cassette message, in a tent outside Baghdad. Justin clutched it like it was a lifeline. "Thank you," he whispered. But Kyle wasn't finished.
"There's more," he said.
"A few people who heard your story wanted to help you take this gift even further. We've started a scholarship fund. For you. And for others like you." Justin blinked. "Like me?" Children of fallen soldiers. Kids growing up with silence and questions. "We call it the SEAT Project." Jessica gasped softly beside him. Her hand found his. Justin looked at the keychain again, then at the car, then at the people gathered around him, strangers once, now bonded not by blood, but by grief, grace, and hope. "I don't know what to say," he said. Rick stepped forward. "Then don't say anything.
Just drive."
Drive for all of us." That weekend, Justin took the Camry out for a long, quiet drive into the hills. The road curved gently through pine trees and open fields, the sun casting long gold shadows across the pavement. He didn't use a map, didn't need a destination. At the top of a ridge, he pulled over and turned off the engine. The world was silent. He reached into the glove box, pulled out the last cassette, one he hadn't played yet. It was labeled only, "The Real Gift." He slid it in, pressed play. Jonathan's voice, softer than before. "If you're hearing this, then it means you found the car. You found me. But here's the thing I want you to know, son. The real gift isn't this car. It's not even my voice. It's your heart. It's what you do next. It's who you become. Drive far, love big, and never, ever forget, you are not alone." Justin didn't cry this time. He just smiled, because now he understood. The seat he longed to sit in was never really about metal or leather or bolts. It was about legacy, about stepping into the story his father had started, and choosing to write the next chapter himself. Spring turned into summer with the gentlest shift. Cedar Hill bloomed in full color. Maple trees unfurled fresh leaves. The town square filled with music on weekends, and porch lights stayed on long after dusk. It was the kind of season that felt like possibility. And Justin Miller had become someone new. Not because something had changed in him, but because something had awakened. A thread once frayed had been rewoven, not just with memories of his father, but with a mission of his own. He'd accepted the scholarship, yes, but he didn't stop there. He asked Kyle if he could volunteer with Follow the Flag. "I want to give someone else their seat back," he said. Kyle smiled wide. "You're not a passenger anymore, kid. You're behind the wheel." Justin's first project was small, a booth at the local fair, inviting children of veterans to share their family stories. At first, the response was quiet. People walked past politely, unsure of what it was. But once they saw the car, his father's Camry, parked beside the booth with a sign that read, "The seat he left behind," they paused. A father pushed his son in a wheelchair to the booth, and the boy reached out to touch the hood. "My mom was in the Navy," the boy said. "She died last year. I didn't get to say goodbye." Justin knelt beside him. "I didn't either," he said. "But you and me, we can still remember them, right?" They exchanged nods.
No te harás.
Just quiet understanding. From that day on, the SEAT project became real. What started as a scholarship grew into a nationwide movement. Old cars were donated and restored by volunteers. Families of fallen service members were invited to ride, some for the first time, in something once touched by their loved ones. Each car had a plaque. Each seat had a story. And Justin? He was in the middle of it all. He spoke at schools, town halls, even on national television. But he never let it turn him into something polished. He always spoke plainly. Honestly. "I didn't know my dad," he'd say. "But now I know who I want to be, because of him." He kept the Camry. Not in a garage, but in motion. He drove it across the country, state by state, collecting letters, cassette tapes, medals, and memories. He called it the Legacy Drive. He kept a journal, one page for every person who sat in the car. One page for every story shared. Jessica rode with him once. They drove back to the place where Jonathan had proposed, a hilltop outside their old high school. She didn't cry. She just looked out the window and whispered, "He'd be proud of you, Justin." Justin placed his hand over hers on the gear shift. "I hope so. But you know what?" She turned to him. "I'm proud of me too." Years passed. Justin didn't become famous. He didn't make millions. But he did something better. He became known. Known by the children who sat beside him, telling stories of parents lost in battle. Known by the veterans who once felt forgotten, now remembered in leather-bound journals and stitched patches. Known by the people who no longer saw an old Toyota, but a vessel for healing. The Camry eventually stopped running. After 25 years and over 300,000 miles, it took its final breath on a roadside in Nebraska, the engine finally giving in with a soft hiss under an orange sky. Justin sat beside it for hours. Then, with help, he had it towed home. But not to bury it. To preserve it. He placed it in a museum. Not a grand hall of marble and glass, but a quiet room in a community center built by the SEAT Project. There, the car rests, headlights dim, driver's seat open to all. Next to it sits a small sign. This seat belonged to a father. Then to a son. Now, it belongs to anyone searching for connection. Beside the plaque, a cassette deck waits. Visitors press play. And Jonathan's voice still fills the room. You're gonna grow up strong, kiddo. Justin still drives. A newer car now, gifted to him by a grateful family from Tennessee whose son, too, found his story through a seat left behind. But in the glove box of that car, tucked gently beneath the manual, sits one small, worn cassette. He doesn't play it often. He doesn't need to anymore. Because he carries that voice now. Not in tape, not in metal or gears or cloth, but in purpose. In every mile. In every memory shared. And in every quiet moment when a child sits behind a wheel, closes their eyes, and remembers someone they loved.